Each of us is choosing between, do we live in a world that's terrible and horrible and we're vulnerable to it? Or can we tap into our spiritual strength and be a light in the darkness?
Mm.
When a light burns in the darkness, it's much brighter than if it burned with other lights. So it's a time of deep choosing and deep reflection and deep asking, who am I and what am I here for?
Hey everybody, I'm Dougall Fraser. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I'm delighted that you're here. I was so excited about my interview this morning and I wanted to be prepared. So my chakras are aligned. I have worked out. I even did a cold plunge because I wanted every part of my body to be alert to talk to my guest today. My guest today is an incredible author. He's written 30 books. Some of my favorites include A Course in Miracles Made Easy, Enough Already, and most recently, his new book is Friends in High Places. This is one of my favorite authors and inspiration to me for many years, and I'm proud to call him a friend. Please welcome Alan Cohen. Good morning, Alan, or should I say aloha?
Aloha to you, my friend.
So you are living back in Hawaii, yes?
Yeah, we're back on Kauai now.
How are you feeling about that? Tell me, is it paradise? Is it everything?
Loving it. No complaints. Thank you, God.
This morning I was getting ready for our interview today, Alan, and I was thinking about the last time we saw each other. Do you remember the last time we saw each other?
Well, of course I do. Which incident are you remembering?
So the moment that I'm remembering is that it was March of 2020. I had just landed in Narita Airport in Tokyo. I'm standing at customs as they're checking my visa, and I hear someone screaming behind me, "Don't let him in!" And I thought, who is that? And I turn around and it's you.
Right. Okay. That was funny. Very cute. Yeah.
And then we rode the train into the city. And interesting that that's the last time we saw each other in person, because I don't know if you got the memo, but the world since that time has become sort of a unique place. Have you noticed that?
Oh, really? Now tell me about it.
And what's interesting, Alan, is, the truth is you have always been such an inspiration to me. I love your work. I've called you for advice before. And last night when I was getting ready for bed, I often set my intention for the day, for the following day. And the intention for me from a business perspective was that we were going to have this interview. And I wanted to have this really soulful, sort of optimistic discussion and, raise my vibration and all of those things that we hear. And yet I woke up to terrible news. There was a shooting in Brooklyn, New York. And I thought, wow, like another sort of element to the avalanche that we're dealing with right now. What do you think is going on with the energetic climate of the world?
Well, I think there's two things are happening. One is the contrast between the light and the dark is growing stronger. The love is getting lovelier and the weird is getting weirder. Mm. And each of us is having to make a choice about which ground we're going to stand on. The other thing is a little more personal, is that each of us is getting many opportunities between choosing between love and fear. Mm. And in the pandemic, as you well know, a lot of people totally freaked out and they just went into total protection, vulnerability, defensive weirdness mode. And other people used it as an opportunity to serve and heal and go in and connect with their families and pray and meditate. And I did a daily YouTube during the whole lockdown. So, each of us is choosing between, do we live in a world that's terrible and horrible and we're vulnerable to it? Or can we tap into our spiritual strength and be a light in the darkness? Mm. When a light burns in the darkness, it's much brighter than if it burned with other lights. So it's a time of deep choosing and deep reflection and deep asking, who am I and what am I here for?
It's interesting about, choosing to live between fear and light, because for me, before the pandemic, and I've been talking a lot of this with healers that I sort of look to for my own personal counsel. But before the pandemic, when I would think of fear or when I would think of anxiety, I would move into the observer mode and I would separate truth from lie. Yeah. And so a lot of my anxiety was lies. They were illusions of reality, something my brain was creating. Yeah. And then Mother Nature decided to create something real. Like there was something sort of in the air. So that balance between what's my relationship with fear how do I manage that has changed, which I believe has ultimately made me stronger, but it is an interesting new approach.
It is. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm a student and teacher of A Course in Miracles, and the Course in Miracles says that all fear is born of illusion.
Mm.
And one of my techniques that I teach my coaches in training is that when any upset, it can be traced back to fear, jealousy, anger, depression, loneliness. There's always a fear behind it. And if you can identify the fear and then identify the illusion, the lie that the fear is built on, then you're getting to the bottom of it. And then behind every illusion is a truth. So it's basically identify the upset, identify the fear behind it, identify the allure, the fear, the illusion that is fueling the fear, and then discover the truth that the illusion is hiding. It sounds complex, but it's actually, once you get into it, it's very easy. So bottom line is that every time we get afraid, we get to look at what lie we're believing in, and then reprogram to recognize the truth, and then we're on to healing. It's actually quite a simple process.
Yeah, and it's interesting. One of the topics I'm super, super curious about right now is I've noticed within my own life, within the life of clients, within friends and families, there's been this redefining of soul groups or relationships, which I think is really interesting. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, I think a lot of us are gravitating more to the people we really belong to than the people we used to hang with or we're taught we're supposed to belong to. And I think Richard Bach, in his book Illusions and Other Illusions, said your true family is not your blood family. Your true family is a family of spirit. And when you find that family, you're home.
Alan, how do you do that? One of the things I love about teaching with you is your ability to pull a quote, a portion of a body of work. You're like a walking Google. I mean, I could no more do that.
Well, you're like a walking Dougal, so
it always first of all, I love that book. I've read that book. Could I remember a simple line from that? That's what tells me that you're a real writer. I've written several books, certainly not 30, but I've written several books. But whenever I'm teaching students about writing, I always use you as the model. I would say Alan's a real writer. What is your creative process?
Well, it's easy and it's fun. I don't know how this happened, Dougal, but I just get downloads of ideas all through the day, except when I'm distracted. And my writing is it's just like a waterfall that's coming, and I just relax and open, and it pours forth. It's the most fun thing I do, and it's not work. There's no such thing as labor, and I mean I have to discipline myself to give myself some time. But once I get into it, it just streams, and it's some kind of soul contract I've had with my higher power to download stuff, and as much as I'm open to it, it comes through.
So let's talk a little bit about download, because that's a spiritual term I hear quite often. I think sometimes it's reference to claircognizance or sort of this receiving of information. And I believe most human beings are having that experience, but they may not know it. So set the scene for us when Alan Cohen has a download. Do lights come out of the sky? Like how magical is it?
It's I think that each of us has some kind of soul contract with some kind of guidance. And you call it your angels, your spirit guides, God, higher power, Holy Spirit, your departed relatives. I mean, you know this better than I do. There's all kinds of beings and energies that are just would love to give us gifts to bring to the world. And I think when we relax and we trust ourselves, as a quote from Goethe, the German philosopher, who said, when you finally trust yourself, you will know how to live. And so I think, I coach all kinds of people who want to be mothers and teachers and healers and Reiki workers and writers and movie producers. And if they can just find the confidence to know that the inner voice they're hearing, sometimes it comes in words, sometimes it comes just in ideas. But if you just, if you trust the voice that is guiding you, not only will it give you the information and the inspiration, but it'll bring you and connect you to the people and projects and circumstances that you can serve. So the whole process is masterfully orchestrated by some higher power that wants to bring good to the world, gives us each of us certain unique gifts to do it, and then delivers that process, to humanity. If we're willing to just relax, listen, trust, and act. That's a
Rel-
pretty good formula. I have to remember that.
Yeah, I was going to say relax, listen, trust, and act. Is that what you
Yeah.
said? Yeah.
Yeah.
So conceptually, I love the idea, but life gets in the way. And I'm curious, was this always a part of your being? I mean, the sense that I get is from your first breath, spirituality was sort of always a part of who you are. But did you have an awakening, so to speak?
I've had many, some big and some little. Gosh, I don't want to go into them now. But when I do awaken, I realize that there's much more to me than the body and personality that's living in the world. That's how I would call awakening. That I begin to define myself as my higher self rather than the lower self. I accept and honor the lower self. That's part of the game. But I start to identify with my source instead of the effect or expression of the source. And then, there was a Star Trek episode. I don't know if you remember. There's a TV episode where they stole Spock's brain. Do you remember that one?
No, I don't remember that one.
Okay, so some alien culture stole Spock's brain, and the Enterprise had to go and find it. And they finally found the planet, and they found the brain, but how to get it back into his head. So Dr. McCoy found what was called, it's pretty funny, but it's clever, called the helmet of knowledge. And it was 1960s special effects, but he put on like this football helmet, and it had all kinds of electrodes and wires and tubes stuck to all kinds of some massive computer somewhere. And he downloads the information of how to put Spock's brain back in his head. And he goes like his eyes kind of bug out of his head, like, yeah. And anyway, he finally figures it out, and he goes about the business of restoring Spock. I mean, the series had to go on. And so it's a kind of a funny image, but we also have a helmet of knowledge. It's not a physical thing, of course, but it's like when we are in the right frame of mind and hit the right vibration, we suddenly have access to the mind of God, if you will. It's like the real internet. It's the internet. Right. Yeah. It's like, everything you could, this is a clairvoyant, that everything that you could possibly want or need to know is available to us. Some call it the Akashic record. And when we're tapped into it, the mind of God becomes our mind, and everything God wants us to know comes through us. And that's the marriage. That's the mystical marriage. Talking about mystical marriage, that is the marriage of the divine and the human coming together to bring blessings to the world.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you used to say to connect into your Gmail first, before Gmail was even a thing, but that was right. You referencing your Godmail, right?
Godmail, something like that, yeah.
One of the things that I love about you as a student, if I may say, when I watch you sort of quote from Star Trek and German authors and, Richard Bach, or what's his name? Illusions, you really have a plethora of places that you choose from. Yeah. And what I find interesting in your most recent book, Friends in High Places, is you give a very intimate look into your learning or your studies from channels and intuitives. What inspired you to write that book?
I had to come out of the closet as somebody who is very aware of and believes in communication with sources beyond the earth. And as you mentioned, I've studied with some really powerful channels and teachers and gurus and psychics and clairvoyants. And I've learned so much from them. They've been really my major teachers during my journey. And I've always kind of spiced my books with some information from them. But I thought it was just time to come out and make a stand and say, this is what I believe in. These are the people who've helped me. Communication with otherworldly sources is real. It's valid. It works. It helps us. There are people out there who can help us if we're willing. And I just had to make a stand for the fact that this has been, a huge part of my life. And I can't go on playing around and making believe it's just an ancillary part of my life. It's been a really essential part of my life.
It's been interesting to me that in the past 2 years, spirituality, New Age philosophies have become even more popular, even
Yeah,
more prevalent. I think there's a
yeah,
real yearning for that. But one of
yeah,
the other things I really admire about you is you talk about separating, for lack of a better word, the charlatans from the authentic
yeah,
connectors.
yeah.
If you had to sort of talk about that a little bit, tell me about that.
Well, I've seen the best and I've seen the worst. I've seen psychics and healers that are extraordinarily gifted, like angels from God. People just it cannot be anything other than God. And I've seen people that are just jokes. They're just it's an embarrassment to the profession. And
Mm,
of course, there's many grades in between. So I think I could bottom line it by saying, if you're a student of an intuitive or clairvoyant or channeler, you have to be honest about the place inside you that it touches.
mm.
When somebody brings through real truth, as you do, I've had readings with you, and I totally respect what you do because you're hooked up. So when somebody speaks truth, this is why I met you, because remember, you were on Colette's show,
That's right.
and she talked about your book, but you knew that anyway.
But you knew that already.
You knew that already, yeah. And it's like, oh, this guy's really cool. And when I had millions of interviews, but when I heard your interview with Colette, I said, this man has a good heart. He's genuine. He's not about ego. He's about spirit. He's about service. So I felt a resonance with you and your material, and we went on to become good friends for many years now.
Mm,
And I think there's other people I listen to. I go, I don't get it. It
mm,
just doesn't touch me in a place where I feel soul fed.
mm.
So when you go to a clairvoyant or a medium or psychic, do you feel like you're uplifted? Do you feel closer to yourself in spirit? Do you feel empowered rather than scared? Because some
Mm.
psychics will give you material that just scare you.
Yeah.
Does it touch you in a place that resonates with your own deep knowingness of truth? When I used to see Carla, you knew Carla from Carla Gordian, she's in the book. Every time I left my clairvoyant reading with her, I'd feel like, well, I knew that already. Just like the title of your book, I feel like
Yeah.
she didn't tell me anything new, but she was confirming what my inner being had already been telling me, but I hadn't been trusting. So we're back to trust, aren't we?
Mm.
And so, do you feel empowered, and do you feel like the psychic is helping you be a stronger person rather than fostering your dependence on that person?
That's
And you
a
and I have had
big
many
one.
conversations about this. You don't see people who are desperate. Maybe
Yeah.
you do sometimes, but you don't foster people coming back to you. You want them to stand on their own 2 feet, and you see them. I think you space out the time you can see them. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the mark of a psychic with integrity, because you're not weakening people by making them run back to you every time they don't know where the toothbrush is.
Yeah. I have had those calls before. Now, for the toothbrush, it's usually
Yeah.
grandma's ring. And back in the day,
Yeah.
I would try to
Yeah.
find it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You talk about the first time that we met through Colette Baron Reed and through that show. And then, one of the things that I will always be grateful to you for is that in my journey as a spiritual teacher, one of my illusions and my fear-based thoughts was that I didn't belong. I wasn't supposed to be
Uh-huh.
there. I wasn't ready. I was this newbie. And you were kind enough to invite me to host a retreat with you in Hawaii. And I will never forget this moment, Alan. And this may mean nothing to you. I was nervous. And you walked up to me in the middle of the tree and you put your hand over my heart and you said, I trust you and I want you to do whatever you want to do.
Cool.
Now, I'm the co-facilitator, so I thought, don't cry, because as an empath, that's my move. But no one had ever treated me that way.
Uh-huh.
Many times with spiritual teachers, I was sort of put in my place, or
Mhm.
sometimes the opening act or something like that is what it felt like. And there was something about the way you did that was so kind and so loving and really gave me permission to step
Yeah.
into my own.
Yeah.
Very, very, very kind of you. I will always remember that.
Well, I do believe in you, and I'm happy you remember that, because that was a meaningful moment to me as well.
Thank you. That was a really fun event.
Yeah, we had a
So
lot of fun, didn't we?
talk to me, Alan, about what have you got coming up? What are you working on? Book number 4,000. Where are we?
I'm working on a book about the inner meaning of the teachings of Jesus.
Mm,
He spoke in parables that you have to peel back the outer layers to get to the inner meaning. So I'm not a Christian. I don't call myself a Christian as part of the religion, but Jesus has been my Sadguru. I think he was, the voice of God. And so what I want to do, I'm taking a metaphysical interpretation of what he taught that most people don't really understand.
Beautiful.
I'm kind of going to the source of what he meant, but as far as I can tell by what he says. So that's exciting. It'll be out in the fall. And then we're also gearing up for our next life coach training. I do a holistic life coach training that really changes the lives of the coaches as well as students. So we're gearing up for that as well.
Yeah, I recommend a lot of people to your life coaching training program because I think it's really incredible. But you just brought something up that's interesting to me. So you're writing right now about Jesus, sort of immersing in some of the teachings. I know you were born into a Jewish background, right?
Yeah.
So I don't have religious guilt. It's always come naturally to me to pull from the Passover is coming up, and that's fun for me. And let's put a Buddha on the Seder plate. I don't care. But a lot of people wrestle with spiritual guilt and, feeling like they have to stay in their lane. How did you teach yourself or give yourself permission to become an explorer?
Drugs had something to do with it back in the 60s.
Well, I know you're a good friend of Ram Dass.
I did some psychedelic exploration. And to be honest, it was not for the woo-woo, let's get naked and dance with Jerry Garcia aspect of it. It was really, I had some major spiritual awakenings during that time that showed me that there was so much more to life than the one I've been living. But some people are freaked out by that, so we'll put it aside. I left Judaism behind because I outgrew it. I was Orthodox Jewish for 7 years, and it was so meaningful to me. It changed my life, and I'm forever grateful for it. But after a while, I felt like I was sitting in a box. I remember there was one fast day when you're not supposed to eat, and I was so hungry. It was late at night. I hadn't eaten all day. And I really wanted to eat. And the voice said, "Why aren't you eating?" And the answer was, I was afraid that God would punish me. And this voice said, "Do you really think that fear is a good reason to be in a religion or to live a life?" And so I ate a piece of cake. And that was an act of faith for me. I did an act of faith to leave the faith. And that was the end of Judaism for me. And I went off and I did all kinds of explorations. I trekked around Europe for 10 weeks, and I went to guru meetings and Zen meetings, and went to Esalen Institute in California. And when I was at Esalen, somebody just showed me this Bible, and it was the New Testament. And as a Jew, I'd never read the New Testament. I had no relationship with Jesus. And when I read his words in red, they jumped out at me like, wow, this guy's really tuned in. Did he do psychedelics? I'm sure he didn't, but he was tapped into the same place that psychedelics had taken me to. And I realized, man, he was coming from a very, very advanced position. So those words spoke to my heart, not as a religious teacher, but as a spiritual master. So that was the beginning of my relationship with Jesus as a personal teacher more than a religious leader.
There's a funny book. I can't recall the name of the author, but it's called God on a Harley, and it's fiction. But have you heard of it? The premise is that Jesus comes back and goes from door to door because he feels misunderstood and wants people to understand it. So if you check it out, it's kind of fun. But Alan, I just have to say, I adore you. I think you do incredible work. I think you make a huge, huge difference on the planet. You certainly have done that for me. And if there's one thing I've learned from you, it's to explore, it's to trust our hearts, to believe that we can connect intuitively. And it's such an honor to call you friend. And I appreciate your being here today.
Well, you as well. And I certainly have the same respect for you, Dougall. I mean, I've met tons of psychics and channelers and healers, more than I can count. And, when somebody with integrity and a good heart who really wants to serve comes along, that's a real blessing. So it's been my delight to turn my students in Japan onto you to, introduce you. So there are thousands of people who've gained from you in Japan. So I'm really honored to be part of that connection as well.
Well, thank you for being here. And tell everybody, how can they reach you? What's the best way that they can find out more about you?
Go to my website, alancohen.com, ALANCOHEN. Check out my life coach training. It's a 6-month intensive that starts in the fall. And then also look for my new book in the fall. I'm really excited about it.
Fantastic. And for everybody watching, don't forget, you are a connection to the universe. You definitely have your own information. As Alan says, we just need to trust and separate truth from lies. I hope you're having an incredible day. Thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone.